Okay, so she asked in exercise 1, we're going to go ahead and assign a correct value to the following data types and print each data or print each variable to Eclipse console. So I'm going to use code blocks because she did say we can use whatever IDE we want. So whichever works for you, I would say go ahead and use that. So I'm using code blocks. So she wants us to use an integer, a float, character, or char, long, which is going to be positive. Long is going to be negative. This one's positive up here as well. An integer, that's going to be negative, some negative value. Short, positive, short, negative, and double, and then float. So the to-do for exercise 1 is to declare or declare and initialize and print values as above. So right here is where she explains we need to include stdio and then stdlib. So I'm going to go ahead and open up code blocks, and we're going to create a new project. Let's go ahead and do an empty project, and we'll hit next. Project title, she was saying workshop, and it was data type, data type. Okay, so I've just got that saved in programming stuff. Let's see. Okay, cool. So I'm going to create a new file, an empty file. I want to add it to my active project. I'm just going to call this source code for now. Okay. So she wants us to include std .io and hashtag include stdlib .h. Okay, cool. So now we're ready to go ahead and code. Let's go ahead and set up our integer or int main, and she wants it to be void. Okay, let's get brackets. Sometimes what I like to do is just kind of put spaces in here when I start coding, just to kind of clear it up so I don't have brackets really close to everything. So she wants us to, let's go back and look here. She wants an integer, well, 2 integers, 2 long, 2 short, a float, a double float. I think this is just her putting float twice here, so I'm just going to ignore that and just do float once. And then she wants a char. So let me go ahead and go back to my program. Sorry, guys. Okay, cool. So we're back here. So let's go ahead and put an integer. We're going to name this, let's name this integer A. And she wants us to initialize it. So to initialize it, you type in your integer name, which we set as A. We're going to initialize it as 10. Cool. Now let's go ahead and do the negative integer. So we'll do int b is going to equal -10. Awesome. All right, now let's go ahead and do our short. So we're going to clarify a short integer as small, and that'll be, let's just say 5. It can be greater than 5 because short's going to take up 2 bytes of memory. So let's go ahead and do our short negative, small, I'll do underscore neg, equals -5. I'm just keeping everything simple here so you guys can kind of see what's going on. We're going to do long int. Make sure you type int after long. And we'll name that as big equals, let's just do 500. So a long integer can go well past 500, up to 2 point something million, but I don't feel like typing that out. And as I'm assuming the way she's going to grade it, she's just checking if you're printing out the print statement for a long integer or a short integer or an integer. So I don't think it matters so much if you say, okay, well, this is going to be a long integer, but it can't be set to an integer because it's too long for just a regular integer value. So I don't think it matters too much. let's go ahead and do big neg for the negative value, and that'll be -500. And then we'll do float, and that'll equal, let's just do FL for float equals 5.5, and then we'll do double. We'll do DFL for double equals 5.575. Okay, cool. So now we're gonna print out these values. So make sure you type your print statement, so printf, and that's gonna call the program to print out whatever you've got in quotation marks here. So let's say we want to print out integer a, okay, and then you've got your %d, and that's gonna allocate an integer that we're gonna later, outside of the quotation marks, we're gonna say which integer we want to be printed there, and then we're gonna say integer b, we can do comma here, and then b, or sorry, integer a, then comma b, %d, and put a comma after your quotation marks, and then we're going to define which variables we want to be printed there. So we want a to be printed first, and then b, because it's respective to the order in which you have your %ds. And let's go ahead and do a line feed here. So I'm coming right here, and we're going to put a line feed in there, which you just do \n for any sort of line feed, and that's just going to go to the next line. So let's go ahead and do our second print statement for our short integers, printf, and then we're going to do short integer small, and then %d. You don't need like %sd or anything like that for short integers, just do %d. And then we're going to do comma small neg %d. Cool. Let's go ahead and do a line feed. So just so nothing looks cluttered, so it's just going to be like our two integer values, two short, line by line. So looking right over here, we're going to put respectively small and then small neg to correspond to the allocation of our variables in our print statements. So let's go ahead and do it for long. Sorry, I forgot to put quotations. So long integer is going to be %d, and the long integer I named as big. So big. Cool. And then we're going to do big neg for a negative value is going to be %d. Go ahead and do a line feed \n, and we're going to allocate or decide which we want to be. So we want big, and then we want big underscore neg to be printed next. So let's go to the next line. We're going to do our print statement again. So printf, every time you want to do a print statement just for variables like this, you're just going to use printf. When you have initialized variables or variables with some sort of set value. So just go ahead and do printf. Make sure you put your quotations, and we're going to do this one more time for our float. So float fl %f. I'm going to have to go up and fix my long integers. I noticed I didn't put these in. So make sure you do LD for %LD for the long integers, because it's when the program reads this, it wants to see %LD, because then it knows like, okay, this is corresponding to a long integer that you have set in the program. So same thing for float. We want to have %F for float, and then we'll put a comma for double float, and you want to do %LF for double float. I know it's weird to think like you wouldn't do %DF, but this way the program knows like, okay, we want % long float, so it's going to be a double float. And respectively, we're going to type in FL and then DFL for a double float right there. So it's going to print both of those value out. And since our program is void, it's going to return nothing, so we don't need to have like a return 0 here, which would make the function return a value and return 0. So when the compiler reads it, the system reads it as, okay, it's returned 0. But she wanted us to set it as void, so we don't need to worry about return 0. So let's go ahead and build our program. Okay, seems like everything's in order. So once that builds, it's taking some time here. Cool, so it just built. So now let's run our program. Awesome. So we have here, let me just pull this up full screen. Okay, so we've got our integer. Actually, that's not as good. Sorry, guys. So I pulled this up. So we have integer A is 10. And you can see this side by side. Integer A is 10. B is 10. Short, small. So our small is going to be 5. Then our negative value for small is going to be -5. Then we have our big and our big negative for our long integer. We got those printed right here is 500 and -500. And then our float and double we have printed here. So one thing, if you notice, it's printing it out to the 6th decimal place for both of these. So in C, it has like a preset value for how many decimal places it's going to print out to. So let me show you something cool here. So because it's printing out to 6, it'll round up to the 6th decimal place. So if we go 5, 7, that's 4 decimal places, now 5 decimal places, 6 decimal places, and then 7. So now we have 7 decimal places, but it's only going to print to 6. So it's going to round up. So if I build this again and then run it, you can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it rounded up because this is 7. It rounded up. So we have 7 as the last decimal place. So what you can do if you want to tell the program how many decimal places you want it to print to, you can simply say for this guy right here, we have 5, and then we have a decimal, and then 5. So that's 3 values. And you need to set, in the print statement here, we say, okay, we have 3 little columns that it's going to print. It's going to print to this column, and then this text column. So that's 3 spaces. So we hit 3. And then we say, okay, we want it to print to the 1st decimal place. So 3, and then you hit 0.1. So it's going to do 1 decimal place. For our long, if we say, okay, I want it to print 7 because we have 7 values here, we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then this is an 8th column and then a 9th column. So this whole thing right here is 9 columns. So we're going to do %9, and we want 7 decimal places, so 0.7. So you can see that right there. 9.7. So we're going to build that again, and then we're going to run it. And you can see now how it's printed 5.5, so 1 decimal place, and there's 3 columns. That was our 3.1. And then our 9.7 is because there's 9 columns for here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you can see that it printed out because I put 0.7. It printed out 7 decimal places, which is awesome. So if you guys want to use that clever trick, you can. I hope this was helpful, and that is obviously the first exercise. I'm going to get exercise 2 and 3 out as soon as possible. Thanks, guys.